Okay, the second blanket concept in composition is this idea of flow. Now, flow is this concept of where the user's eye goes in a particular frame or a composition. So you see that we've got these little flowy lines that represent that. And this is sometimes a bigger deal in photography than it is in motion pictures, simply because with a still image, there's much more time for somebody to actually sit and look at an image and let their eye wander over the frame, and there's no motion to distract from what's going on in the static composition. And in video, the idea of flow is kind of different. Even static compositions, there's usually some sort of motion in the frame, and that kind of hijacks the brain to want to look at the thing that's moving. But there are some other elements that you can control to make your composition better. This is another example of basically using these not so much to make your thing like amazingly more awesome, but it's one of those things to keep in mind to keep unwanted things from distracting from what you're trying to show them. So here's the basic idea. Let's say that you have a shot somewhat like this, and we're going to move it around. Let's move it around so you can see the whole thing. Every image has, lines in it of some sort. And this is probably the most extreme example I could find of using lines in a composition. But basically, any composition is going to have lines in it where you have some sort of edges or sort of high contrast areas. You can think about a picture of a picket fence, and the fence post would create a line. And this image has an awful lot of lines going on with it. So you have the obvious rail lines that are going on here that are converging to a vanishing point in the distance. You've got the same kind of lines in the roof, the ceiling of this tunnel, and then you've got these curved arch lines that are creating another repeating pattern that recedes back to the end, as well as these staircases and the flow of the people and these red dots. And the thing that you can notice here is that all of these lines are going to the exact same point. This is a classic example of a single point perspective with a vanishing point right smack in the middle. So when you have lines like this in your frame, it does actually mess with your eye and your brain and tell it kind of in this sense in a very forceful way, hey, look here, and your eye kind of naturally follows to where all the lines are converging. And again, this is taken from this perspective for a very specific reason. The person sat or stood right in the middle of this to get this shot where all these lines would converge. If they'd just taken this picture from the staircase over here or from further down on one of the edges, the lines would be going in a very different direction. So again, this is something that a photographer thinks about when they're taking an image, because they want to use the power of these converging lines to help draw the focus to what they want to see. So sort of the non-thinking way about doing this is if you just happen to be standing here in between the tracks getting ready to be run over by a train, is if you had a subject, a person that you wanted to shoot, you could put them right there with you, sort of, in this unrealistic spot. But you could put a person down here. This is kind of close to a rule of thirds line, maybe a little too far to the left, so it's not magical composition. But, you could put a person there. And you could do a couple things to make it obvious that that's what the audience is supposed to be looking at. You can make them much brighter than the rest of the frame, but still, there's all these background effects that are just working against what you're trying to do here. There's just a magnetic pull of the viewer's eye that's going to draw it back to that middle spot, and what you have down here is going to take somebody a long time to get around to seeing that. So a better option would be to put your person at the spot where these lines actually converge, and you get several interesting effects from this. One is that obviously no matter where you look in the frame, there's a line that your eye will follow, and for whatever reason humans really like making lines and following them. Will take you right to where you want to see it. So no matter what their point of entry is in this frame, which kind of depends on what the previous frame they were looking at, or their personal preference for different colors, etc. There's lots of points of entry that you could start on in a picture, but the flow is that concept that it's your eye is going to move within the image and take you somewhere. And in this option, it's very linear, very straightforward. There's only one place that your eye is going to go, and so that's a natural spot to put your subject and say, hey, I want you to look at something, so I'm going to put it where this picture is kind of trying to make you look anyway. It also gives you some, I mean, there's some other things going on here. Obviously, that would be a very strange place for somebody to stand. And you get this radiating circles coming out of the person, which is sort of this religious iconography of halos and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of other things going on when you do something like that, but it's something to think about. And again, this isn't something that people watch a movie and go, oh, hey, nice leading lines there that lead to the subject. But it is something that can work against you if you're not conscious of it, if you're not thinking about it, if you're not working that into the decision-making process that you've got when you're making a shot like this. So you're not likely to have such a sort of nuclear option of lines in most of your scenarios, but you do want to make sure that if you do have elements that you could work to your advantage, again, like fence posts and corners of buildings and streets and all kinds of angular lines, there's a couple of things that you want to do. Notice that almost all of these lines in here are not flat, vertical, or horizontal. There's sort of this center line, which is still a little bit diagonal, but for the most part, all of these lines are somewhat diagonal. And diagonal lines make for good composition. They insinuate motion. You know, a flat horizontal line reminds us of the horizon, and so it makes us think of sort of passiveness, and it doesn't look like there's a lot going on there. But angled lines have a horizontal and a vertical sort of potential of movement. So when you can use diagonal lines in your compositions, you should go ahead and try for it, and especially if you can make them lead into your subject. That's the concept of leading lines that will make your composition stronger.